Okay. Going.
Okay. All right. So welcome everyone to the Buildings and Energy Technical Working Group. We're so glad you're here today. This word cloud on the front screen is what you all entered at the end of our last meeting. So just to kind of give you a sense of how everyone was feeling at the end of our first meeting. All these slides will be made available in the Google Drive after today. But we're pretty excited about the group that we have and where everyone is in wanting to make progress together. So for the agenda today, we're going to settle in, go over some ground rules. We have Brianne Fisher from our office who will go over a recap from the previous meeting and the equity piece that we really want to make sure everyone understands, because that's going to feed right into the vision statement. And we'll end today with a group discussion and a wrap up and talk about some next steps. So first, we want you to meet your Office of Sustainability team. I'm Dawn Alexi, Climate Action Program and Operations Supervisor, and the rest of the team is on the call today. So we wanted to give you a chance to meet each of them and to let you know which working groups they're supporting. I am supporting this one, the Waste Working Group, and also the Transportation Working Group. And with that, I will pass it on to Alicia.
Thank you, Dawn. Hi, everyone. I'm the Sustainability Manager and leading the office, and my job is to support all of my awesome team and all of the work they're doing supporting all of the working groups. So I'm not assigned to any one working group, but I'm here for all of the working groups and all of you. So happy at any point in time if anyone has any questions or would like to discuss anything about the planning process, please feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you, and I'll throw it over to Brianne.
All right. Hey, everybody. I'm Brianne Fisher. I am the Sustainability Coordinator with the Office of Sustainability. And in my role, I am supporting the Environment Working Group, as well as supporting the overall planning process for RVAgreen 2050. And so you'll be hearing a little bit more from me later in this meeting. I will pass it to Kyla.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kyla Logan. I'm the Management and GIS Analyst for the Sustainability Office. I am working with the Environment Working Group as well as the Community Working Group, but I'll be supporting all the working groups when it comes to data and GIS needs. I'll go ahead and pass it over to Kendra.
Hi, I'm Kendra. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator in the office. So I work on getting community feedback and helping spread the RVAgreen 2050 planning process out beyond technical experts and into the community. I'm also working with the community working group, and so I'll close it out with Wendy.
Okay, and I'm Wendy Fuster. I'm the Climate Action Coordinator in the office, and I'm working with Dawn on this working group, as well as the Transportation Working Group and the Waste Working Group.
And if I could just add one thing, just also to let folks know that both Brianne and Kendra are also supporting our Racial Equity and Environmental Justice Roundtable.
Great, thank you, Alicia. Thank you to the rest of my team. This is definitely a team effort, so we're all in this together. Next, just want to go through some ground rules, and don't need to revisit each one of these, but I do want to point out a couple of new ones. Make sure that when we are really getting into building the framework of this plan, that we're speaking from our own lived experiences. We're speaking from we're not necessarily representing a broad we. I think that'll really add some value. And then also language 101. I know we're all coming from a lot of different areas of expertise, and it's so easy to just rattle off big words and acronyms, but be sure to take a step back and define any acronyms and new terms that are important for the whole group to be aware of. And of course, being careful of language that's inaccessible. There's a steep learning curve to a lot of this information. So now I'm going to hand it over to Wendy to introduce the icebreaker while I start to put you all in breakout rooms.
Okay, well, while Dawn's getting that organized, we just wanted to start off with a little icebreaker. We'll split up into small groups and just talk about what are some ways that we can make the holidays coming up more green and more sustainable. So any ideas you have that you can share amongst each other, and when we all come back, we'll share some of the best ones with everybody. So we can do that. And let's see, and there you go. Go ahead and join your breakout room when you see it.
Speak up if you're not seeing your breakout room, and I'll help you. And Wendy, you can stop record. Oh, where did she go?
I'll pause.
75 million gallons of water a day, and most of our electricity use is to aerate that water. And so in the wintertime, when the temperature is colder, we use less electricity because it takes less aeration to satisfy the needs for our critters in the reactors. So that's one way we reduce consumption during the wintertime. We use less
Awesome.
electricity to aerate the biological reactors.
Awesome. Anyone else have any ideas for making our holiday or winter activities more sustainable?
Our little group of 4 talked about less travel and gifting experiences and buying local, but I think the most innovative one was gifting trees, whether planting them in a forest and having a nonprofit do that, or Michael's buying fruit trees that he's going to plant in an orchard for his kids.
That's awesome. I love that. Anyone else have anything you want to share? I heard a good one the other day, especially after Thanksgiving, when I made this huge holiday spread and we have leftovers for several days, and it did end up being waste. It's like, it would be more sustainable to just cook for the small group you have and not generate as much food waste. Okay, well, unless anyone else has anything, we will move on. I'm going to hand it over to Brianne Fisher. She is now sharing her screen. So Brianne, take it away.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you everybody for having me. It's fun to be in a sort of different environment for me on this buildings and energy topic. So I'm excited to see what I can learn from you all. But for now, I want to take a few minutes and provide a little bit of a recap of what you all talked about at your first meeting a few weeks ago. And just make sure, like Dawn said in the beginning, that everyone in all of our working groups really is on the same page as far as what RVAgreen 2050 is, what we hope to accomplish, what your very important role within RVAgreen 2050 will be, and then also a little bit on the equity piece, because that will be so central to the activities that we do together. So some of this all of this you might have heard already, but we just want to make sure that it is cemented into everyone's brains. And then I'm happy to take questions once I get through a few slides. But just to start, big picture, RVAgreen 2050 again was announced by Mayor Stoney back in 2017. This is the next evolution of the city's sustainability program, which has existed since 2010. And with RVAgreen 2050, we are taking an integrated approach to planning for climate change. So if we had been doing a climate plan, 5-10 years ago, we might do these in separate pieces. We might look at greenhouse gas emissions and how to reduce them in one plan. Then we might look at the impacts of climate change and how to deal with and adapt to those in a different plan. And then equity might be sort of a co-benefit that we would think about within those, but not necessarily a focus area. So with RVAgreen 2050, we're bringing all of those 3 elements together. So as you all know, on the climate action side, The goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to net zero by 2050. On the climate resilience or adaptation or preparedness side, we are going to be helping our community prepare for and become more resilient to the climate impacts that Richmond is already experiencing and will be getting worse in the future. These include higher average temperatures, more heat waves that are particularly dangerous to human health, more extreme and frequent precipitation events that are coming obviously more often as rain as our climate warms, which is causing more localized flooding. And then to a much lesser extent, but something that's on our radar because of our position on the James River, is sea level rise. And we'll be talking about all of those climate impacts as in our working groups sometime in January. So get ready for that. And then around all of that is a focus on equity, and particularly racial equity. I'll go into a little bit more detail about that piece. Suffice to say, though, for now, we know that climate change affects some members of our community differently than others, and some are more disproportionately impacted based on a number of factors. And so we want to make sure that RVAgreen 2050 is a truly sustainable plan, in that it is accessible and it benefits and tries to reduce burdens for those in our community who may experience them otherwise. So RVAgreen 2050 is one in a number of steps that the city has taken across many plans and initiatives that some of you may have already been a part of. So one in particular I want to point out is Richmond 300, which is the city's newly adopted master plan as of Monday night. City Council adopted the final plan for Richmond 300. This is a set of broad sort of policy goals, and there's a whole environment section that I know a few of you worked on with me and others from our team over several years. And what we'll be doing with the Richmond 300 content, as well as some of these other plans, is looking at the strategies and goals that they have put into place and thinking about how we can make them action oriented. So getting more specific to the timeline of looking at the next 5 to 8 years or so, and how we can also potentially make them more equity and people oriented. So thinking about the lived experience of our Richmond community and how they could be impacted by the things in these plans that relate to climate action and resilience. How are we going to do all of this? RVAgreen 2050, we like to say, is at the nexus of equity, climate action, and climate resilience. We have several inputs to each of those 3 focus areas, all of which you will be receiving at some point if you haven't. Some of these you've received already. So on the equity side, we as a team have done and are continuing to do a lot of internal, both personal and professional learning around equity. I'll say I've been on this journey of RVAgreen 2050 for about 2.5 years. And it's taken that long to really get comfortable with talking about equity, and particularly racial equity when it comes to climate change. So this is a long process with a lot to learn and a lot to share, and we want to make room for that, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. We also have our Racial Equity and Environmental Justice Roundtable, which we have several members of on each working group. And this is a group of folks who represent a variety of diverse communities from around Richmond, who are being paid to contribute their lived experience, expertise, to make sure that our actions and strategies that we come up with on the climate action and resilience side are equitable, are people-centered, and speak to the lived experience of people in Richmond. And then on the climate action and climate resilience side, we will have technical inputs, which include modeling, and y'all get into more of that in future meetings. We have best practices from other cities and other sort of institutions that are looking at these issues, particularly at the nexus with equity. And this will be a lot of content, but we will be guiding you all through all of this and providing as much support as we can. So just big picture, wanted to provide an overview of the RVAgreen 2050 timeline. As I mentioned, Mayor Stoney announced RVAgreen 2050 back in 2017, and we've taken the last, really the 2 years after that to do a lot of internal capacity building, looking at what other cities are doing on the forefront of climate planning, which is at the nexus of equity, climate action, and climate resilience. Bringing on our awesome new team members earlier this year and some other activities. And then in 2020, we've been concentrating on gathering stakeholders, listening especially to our communities that are on the front lines of climate change, to what their priorities are, so that we can take that information and make sure that the strategies that we produce together over the drafting period in 2021 speak to that experience. So right now, we are right here in December 2020. We are setting the foundation for all of our activities that we will conduct later in the process, which will include beginning to draft strategies early next year, which will go out for a period of community-wide engagement and input in spring. Then we will convene our working groups back together over the summer to take in that community input, refine the strategies, and also start thinking about implementation. So this will be a very implementation focused plan. Again, we are looking at shorter timeframes, 5 to 8 years or so. And so we want to think about implementation as we are drafting strategies. All of that will then go out for another round of community-wide engagement and input in the fall. And then we will come back together over the next few months after that to refine and finalize everything for another sort of sign off by the community in the spring of 2022, and then adoption hopefully by Earth Day of 2022. And I said this to the environment group, so I'm extending the invitation to you all. There will be a massive party at my house on Earth Day 2022, and you are all invited. Yes, Jeff, you are invited. I like your energy. So that's just a broad overview, and we'll be providing more detail as we approach each of these steps. The other thing that I wanted to say here is that because we are using an innovative approach to climate action planning, climate action and resilience planning with this equity focus that really no other city has done yet, we are working with a number of other cities across the country that are at the forefront of this with us. But we will maintain flexibility. We are going to be changing things most likely along the way, just because we need to maintain sort of responsiveness to what the community wants to see out of this process and our content. All right, so within all of that, there are several key groups that will assist with various parts of this process. Going out of order here, our office is the primary convener for the process. You just met our whole team. We will be supporting all of the working groups and the roundtable. We will be bringing as much information as you all can handle and want to help you help us draft the plan itself. We will be supported by various third parties, which include outside facilitators. We'll be working, for example, with VCU on an assessment of our process to see how, to what extent we have incorporated equity. And then you all are obviously on one of our 5 working groups. The role within the working groups is to help translate community priorities into equitable climate action and resilience strategies from your lived as well as technical expertise. And then our roundtable, again, is a group of folks who represent a diverse range of communities across Richmond, and they will be helping us to elevate voices, especially of those communities that have been traditionally left out of city planning processes, among other things. All right, so a little bit more on the how. We will be working on drafting strategies together, again, early next year. So we're still in sort of the foundation setting phase right now, but just to give you a preview, we will be using 2 I guess frameworks might be a thing to call them, to think about the strategies that we are drafting. So one is this nexus concept. Are we looking at, you know, things in a siloed way, or are we looking at how we could potentially produce benefits across all three of our areas: equity, climate action, and climate resilience? In addition to that, we'll be using a SMARTY framework. So if any of you have, you might be familiar with strategic planning processes that have used SMART as a goal setting or strategy setting framework. And if you haven't, that's totally fine. We will be providing materials around this. Essentially, what we're going to do is make sure that every action and strategy that we draft together is tied to, a timeline, is tied to a set of implementation steps, and certain departments or people or actors are responsible for taking those steps, and that we have metrics to make sure that the action is progressing in the way that the community wants it to. And if not, we have mechanisms to go back and correct that. In addition to those parts of the SMART framework, we are adding the IE, which is inclusive and equitable. And we will provide, again, more materials on like this SMARTY framework, but we want to make sure that every strategy incorporates equity, and we will be working together on a tool, our equity screening tool, I believe at the next meeting, for you all, for all of our working groups actually now, to help us do this. So more to come on that. That is the end of the sort of logistical pieces. And I wanted to take three more slides to talk a little bit more about the equity piece. But before I do that, does anyone have any questions on sort of timeline, process, that sort of thing, before I wrap up with a couple more slides? Jeff does not have questions. Thank you, Jeff. No, and we'll be here obviously the whole time along the way. So as you have questions, please let us know. So before you all get into today's activity, which is thinking about a vision for RVAgreen 2050, we just wanted to set a little bit of a reminder about why equity is so important in this discussion, and particularly racial equity. So equity has emerged really over the last few years, I would say, as a vital piece of sustainability planning and climate planning. And that is because climate change, as I mentioned earlier, is affecting some community members across the world, but also here in Richmond, differently than others, and some are facing disproportionate impacts. And this is based on a number of root causes and existing social, demographic, biological, health, and other factors, which can potentially make individuals and communities more sensitive to the impacts of climate change. For example, heat waves. You are more likely to suffer a heat-related illness if you have a pre-existing condition like asthma, or if you are above a certain age, or if you live in housing that is not efficiently insulated and you do not have central air conditioning, you might be suffering from hotter indoor temperatures and poorer air quality. So a lot of this comes down to race here in Richmond, and that's because of the historic and existing racist policies, programs, and their legacies that have caused our city to really be geographically separated, segregated by race. And for many of the inequities and the underlying factors that were on the previous slide to really come down to race. And so what we show here is on the left, our climate equity index, which is a combination of 39 demographic, health, housing, transportation, a number of other factors that are combined to show the potential vulnerability at a neighborhood or census tract level to the impacts of climate change. And then on the right are just simply maps of Black and African American and Hispanic and Latino populations in our city. This is all just to show that so many of these maps, if you take any individual factor that could make a person more susceptible to harm because of climate change, will come down to race. And so to address this, we are using this framework to think about what equity means within RVAgreen 2050. And we are using this three-pronged approach on procedural equity. This is making sure that right now in this process, we are being inclusive, that our process is transparent, that we are making sure it is open to the entire community, and we're providing opportunities that work for people to be able to participate in this process. On the distributional end, this is about the plan itself and the strategies that we'll be drafting together. So thinking about who benefits and who is burdened potentially by the strategies we come up with, among a number of other things. And the equity tool that you all got a preview of in your homework, but that we'll also be talking about more in the next meeting, will help us to examine some of the details within the distributional equity piece. And then structural or institutional equity is really the big picture of the impact of these past policies and programs, particularly those impacting that are explicitly and not explicitly racist, that have caused our current systems to serve people in disproportionate ways. So we know we're not going to solve those issues with this plan, but we hope to chip away at them by making our process more equitable, serving as an example for both with lessons learned and successes for future city planning processes, and then also creating some community ownership, hopefully, in this plan and future initiatives. That is everything. And I'm going to turn it back to Dawn for a more detailed look at the workflow. But does anyone have any questions about anything I just went over? Or does anybody from my team have anything to add, I should say? All right. Well, I'll be here for anything I can help with. And thank you all again for having me.
And thank you so much, Brianne. Very well put. As you can see, a lot of work and study and years have gone into pulling all this together and incorporating it into our planning process. So it is a lot to take in and a lot to process in our own work, and then try to incorporate into this long-term planning for the community. So please, ask any questions. I wanted to go over the workflow so that everyone has a little better sense of what the ask is on this committee. So the yellow bar is the Racial Equity and Environmental Justice Roundtable, and that is the group of citizens who have been selected. They've applied to be on this roundtable and they were selected. They're receiving a stipend. Their lived experience is very valuable. And so they are everything's going to end up kind of filtering through that group to make sure that this equity piece is central to all of our strategies. And then the next layer is the community working group. And that is the group that is taking in the people-centered piece of this in terms of community wealth and public safety and housing and some of the areas that are the community priorities as identified in our listening sessions that Kendra and Norel conducted all last spring and over the summer. And these 7 areas were identified as community priorities. So we want to make sure that all of those are incorporated into our strategies. And then the technical working groups. You guys are the buildings and energy group. We have the environment group, the transportation group, and the waste group. And so we're in the third meeting, refining the vision today. And then the next meeting on January 6th, we'll go over the equity tool. Those are both documents that have come from the roundtable, and they're getting our feedback. Then they'll go back and be refined by the roundtable. Then at the second meeting in January on the 20th, we'll go over the climate vulnerability and risk assessment. And that's going to be getting more into a lot of infrastructure questions. We're going to really need your feedback on kind of your technical expertise when it comes to assets in Richmond. And then in February and March, we'll be drafting and revising strategies. And there'll be a lot of back and forth. That's where all of the outputs from our meetings will go up through the other working group and the roundtable. And we'll be getting lots of communication between the meetings through the staff. And then in March, the strategies will be presented to the roundtable for final review, and then they'll also go to city administration for their review and feedback to make sure that this is inclusive of everyone. And then after that, we go out into the community engagement phase 2, and that'll be towards April. So any questions on the workflow at this point? Okay. Then with that, we are here. And we'll go on into the vision statement. So this is where we want to know, what will Richmond look like when RVAgreen 2050 is implemented? And to come up with this guiding vision, the roundtable started with some foundational information. So this kind of definition of what is RVAgreen 2050. You've heard a lot about it. You've seen this paragraph written in other materials and on the website. And then the Richmond 300 comprehensive plan is foundational to what we're trying to do. So those were handed to the roundtable to start drafting the vision statement. Some other examples from Portland, Bend, Oregon, City of Everett, Providence. These are all good examples of equity-based climate actions plans and their vision statements. I'll just read the one. You can see the City of Providence has a climate justice plan that says Providence's vision for a low carbon future is one where your race or zip code no longer determines your health or economic outcomes, where decisions are made collectively to allow those who are most impacted to have the greatest say, where land stewardship is valued over ownership, where access to clean water and land is not just a luxury for the wealthy, but a fundamental human right. This plan will set a path for Providence, but it is up to the residents and businesses in the city to make sure that we take it. So that's just to give you an example of one that is inclusive and that the working group, the roundtable, used to come up with theirs. And then backing up a little, this is a word cloud that was generated through all the listening sessions. This is what our community has identified as their vision of an equitable climate action for a healthy and resilient Richmond. So we do have a couple of folks from the roundtable. I would love for someone to read this to us. This was put together in our climate justice, our environmental justice roundtable, and I'm not sure who was on the call. I can't see everyone at once. I'm sorry.
Giovanni roundtable? Yeah.
Giovanni, are you available?
I'm sorry, I couldn't figure out what
Are you
mute
willing?
button was. I'm here.
If you're willing, we'd love for you to read.
We would love
the
for you to
vision
introduce
statement.
this to the group.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. I'm Giovanni Armstead, and I am a part of the roundtable. We worked pretty hard on this vision statement, I think, over the course of 2 sessions. And after pulling it together, pulling apart and putting it back together, this is what we have. The vision for an equitable, healthy, and resilient Richmond is one where carbon emissions are net zero and a person's race, identity, social, economic status, or zip code does not determine life expectancy, quality of life, or economic opportunity. What you'll see under that are just kind of 3 subheadings of that. We try to just make that big vision stand out so people can clearly understand where we are. And then the 3 under that will definitely answer all of your who, what, when, where, and hows for that vision statement. Should I read those 2 or? Just keep, okay. Everyone has equitable access across the entire city to resources that are clean, sustainable, and affordable, including air, water, energy, housing, transportation, and green infrastructure. Everyone has the capacity and resources to take ownership of equitable climate action and community resilience planning. Identity includes, but is not limited to, race, ethnicity, age, ability, gender, sexual orientation, and religion. We lead with race in our work to transform systems impacting all marginalized groups. So as you can see, it sounds like a whole lot, but it's all really one healthy goal to make us all better.
Excellent. Thank you so much for reading that to us. So you can see there was the City of Seattle has a great article or white paper on why lead with race. And we'll share that link with you afterwards too, if you want to see why that is so important that it's central in our plan. So with that, what we're going to do next is send you into breakout rooms again. And there's a link in the chat, I believe, to the Google Doc. And I'll show you what that looks like. So you will be in a room with either Irina, Adam, these are the black headings. So when group 1 is with Irina, group 2 is with Adam, group 3 is with Wendy, and group 4 is with David. When you click on that Google Doc in the chat, and I do want to make sure everyone knows how to do that. I'm just going to walk everyone through it. If you go to your I don't know what it's called, the bar where it says chat, and click on that, you'll see a link to a Google Doc. Click on that link and it'll open up what I'm showing you on the screen. And then what you can do there is go to the slides that are under your work group. So I'll pretend like I'm in Irina's group. And then my first slide, I'm going to read through you can read through this together. You're going to be in a group with about 5 or 6 other people. And you're going to type in these sticky notes what you like. And this is just a free for all, pretend like we have sticky notes on the wall. You're going to write what you like. You can click on these stars and drag them over. I think you double click in the sticky note in order to start typing. And then you'll drag your star over. If you like what other people are saying, this is so that the staff and the round table can see what's popular, where the kind of the group is heading on what they like. The second, and we'll have about 15 minutes for this breakout session. So once you get through the what you like slide, click on the next one in your grouping. And that's where you're going to say what you don't like or what you think is missing, some constructive feedback, and then drag your stars up if you agree with what other folks are saying. And then the third one in here is the question, how do you see this vision guiding the buildings and energy working group? And this is kind of an exercise that's helpful for us as staff, but it's also an exercise for all of you to start thinking about how this vision does, kind of feed into what you see your role as or what's important when considering buildings and energy. And then just as a reminder, if you want to go back and kind of take a look again at the working groups and some of the concepts that they're thinking of, this might just be helpful to revisit the buildings and energy topics, transportation and land use topics, waste topics, community topics, environment topics. These are the kinds of things we'll be getting into further on in the meetings. But with that, any questions before I send you on your way? You will have facilitators, like I said, in each room. Group 1 is with Irina, group 2 is with Adam, group 3 is with Wendy, and group 4 is with David. If you want to stay behind, I will be in this main room. You can leave your group at any time if you have to come back and have a question for me. You have 15 minutes. Anything I missed, Wendy?
No, I think that's good.
Okay, so with that, let me go into, oh, you know what? Every time I drag this around, I I moved my old bar. Here we go. Okay, here you go.
You might want to stop recording while we're in breakouts, or I'll leave that up to you.
Thanks.
Mhm.
Did they go? Did everyone get a note that says? Looks like some good feedback. Did you get a prompt, Brianne, that pulled you back?
No, I didn't get anything. I think because I'm a host or something, I wasn't getting any of the time reminders if you were sending those out. So
Yeah, I wasn't either. I just told my group to come back because I figured it was past time. So-
Okay, then let me go ahead and stop the breakout rooms. It's like Irina had a busy group.
Mhm. Yeah, it was good.
Great. Okay, welcome back, everyone. Wendy, are we recording?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I hope that went okay. I know a couple people weren't able to access the Google Docs, and I'm sorry about that, but certainly want to get your input. This is going to be available. This link is in this share drive, the Google Share, and the roundtable will be meeting next week. So you have the next few days to go back in and add anything that you want to add. But first, I certainly want to get feedback. So how about if someone from each of the groups, I don't know if you selected someone to speak for you, but we want some feedback. So let's start with Irina's group. Does someone have something they'd like to share?
Yeah, I'll start off, I guess. As far as the what do you like, I think you can read there. There were several comments. I think that it was a good inclusive statement. Hit a lot of most of the high points needs to cover. So I think there's consensus that I guess location, not just socioeconomic status, was kind of a key part of the vision statement. On the second one, what don't you like and what was missing? Some of the things, the term green infrastructure seemed maybe a little bit too vague. I think part of that, I know there's been some discussion about access to parks and green space that may or may not be in that definition of green infrastructure. Let's see. There's discussion about the just focusing on CO2 or whatever. We need to look at other pollutants. And educational opportunity could be something added to the first part of the statement.
Okay, great. Anyone else from group one want to add anything?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
On the slide, does everyone have the capacity and resources? Can you guys elaborate on that one a little bit?
Oh, I could maybe, because I put that one for something that I thought was missing, where there's different barriers for different people for public participation. So I think everybody has the inherent like capability to help, but some people, based on situations, like I have some personally where I can't make it to speak for myself to certain events and things like that, is what I would read that as.
Does that help, Giovanni?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, how about group two, Adam's group? Who wants to speak?
Yeah, I think we had some really great discussion. I think Jessica was willing to provide some thoughts and comments based on what we discussed.
Yeah, so for what we liked, we thought that the goal was very inclusive and ambitious, and that it provided the opportunity for anyone to take part in the process. Kind of our highlights there. For what we didn't like or what is missing, how are we going to make sure that this is in fact achieved? Just laying it out there that reaching these goals will be a challenge. And then also wanting to see some sort of language or reference to partnerships with neighboring jurisdictions or other coalitions.
Excellent, thank you. How about Wendy's group?
Let's see. Any volunteers from my group? I don't know. You don't want to, Jeff? I see you shaking your head no. All right, I can take it. Let's see. We'd like that affordability was mentioned in access, because if you can't afford it, then it's not accessible. We like that it's not limiting identities, but giving lots of examples of what that could include. It captured the essence in the main statement and then provided additional detail in the bullets. And like the third bullet, because it explained why race is first and why identity is separated out. And it says the obvious, net zero, and then concentrates on access and equity. So those are some of our likes. As far as what was missing, we thought maybe employment could be listed under equitable access, which could be a little broad, but just that, living wages or being able to support yourself has a role to play in there. And it's missing net zero, or defining what the actual goal is. Let's see, we didn't have a lot of negatives there. And yeah, so those are the main points.
Great, and how about David's group?
Does anyone want to jump in from group 4?
Like it's you.
I'm happy to. So we thought that overall it was an excellent sort of encapsulation of a lot of important ideas here, and specifically talked a lot about the importance that socioeconomic status was highlighted in that main vision. Some things that we discussed that may be missing or that we perhaps wanted to make clearer. I think first and foremost was that this was sort of a shared vision, or some sort of reference to this vision coming from the community and coming from a lot of different voices that may not always be considered in something like this. And so we thought that was an important point to highlight. And then, like a few others had said, just being maybe more specific where possible. So elaborating maybe beyond just a focus on carbon emissions, but other ways that sustainability, that we're going to focus on mitigation, what green infrastructure means sort of at the neighborhood level, if that's parks, if that's walkability. So just looking to expand a little where possible. And that there was no mention of food in the list of things that we want to make sure that are clean and sustainable and affordable.
Okay, great. Thank you so much to everyone for taking the time to do that and really understand what this vision is that we're going to be working towards as a guiding principle. So this, like I said, this Google Doc is available to all of you. Please go into each other's groups as well and drag your stars to enunciate anything that you think is important. This feedback is really, really helpful to staff and the roundtable so that we can finalize this vision. So with that, let me jump back into the presentation. Also, at the bottom of the Google Doc, you'll see there are some bullets where you can add any other text that you think is missing. If you want to write something out that doesn't quite fit in a sticky note, feel free to make that a working document in whatever way is most effective for you. Okay, so this is where just want to take 5 minutes for a group check-in. Think of this as taking notes on the meeting. You know, did we learn anything new? Where are you now as opposed to an hour and a half ago or an hour ago? What connections did you make across the whole conversation? Do we understand now why we're centering equity in our climate action planning, or is it still a little vague? You know, any epiphanies you want to share with others? No such thing as a dumb question or statement. We're all new to this. We're all coming from different places. And where could we offer more learning or focus meetings? One idea that's been tossed around is having kind of small group sessions between, if you want to learn more about climate change, or you want to learn more about equity or some other topic that would kind of help give more guidance to these larger meetings. So I just want to open up the floor. I'm going to take, like I said, 5 minutes. We're going to take notes and just want to get your feedback, questions, comments, suggestions, all of the above. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself.
One thing I've been thinking about the vision based on our breakout group is where net zero carbon emissions is placed and where health equity and resilience is placed. And I'm wondering, when I think about climate action planning and how justice and resilience and equity are so important to it, I'm wondering if what we're talking about is a vision for a carbon neutral Richmond, that is centered in equity, health, and resilience, because that would just make more sense to me. Whereas equity, health, and resilient Richmond, carbon emissions is only one aspect of that. There's so many other components to those things. So if our vision is for a healthy, equitable, and resilient Richmond, we really need to be doing a lot more than focusing on carbon emissions, but that's a huge topic. So I believe the vision that I think we're looking at is really, in a climate action planning session, is net zero carbon emissions with a focus or attention paid to or centralizing health equity and resilience. That just makes it easier for me to understand, and I'm just not sure if I'm correct or not. So that's something I think I would love to gain some clarity on.
Excellent point. Does anyone have anything to add to that or to build on it?
I'd like to second it. I was surprised as well to see it not lead off with climate, or something like mitigating climate damage, and do it in a way that's equitable. But I mean, we're here because of the that issue that needs to be tackled.
And Michael, I was having kind of the same, but the opposite thought, where I was thinking that all of these things are very important, and that the net zero is kind of the period on the sentence. So it's the thing that you leave them with. But I think that with the primary goal being net zero, it's kind of buried in the middle almost.
Rob kind of had it perfectly in right near the beginning of what he said, a climate neutral Richmond that is equitable, healthy, and resilient. And first, real clear for my clarification, and this was part of our group's discussion, because so much of that vision was kind of broader sustainability rather than purely climate, if there is such a thing. Yeah, is carbon, is that carbon neutrality kind of, or yeah, it's tough to parse out the primary goal. I think the important point is that these are interactive, that, as I think of it, without peace, you don't have ecological, you'll have unsustainable ecological damage. That, we can build all the net zero buildings, et cetera, but one war comes along and it's all shot to hell. So, and that goes down to the neighborhood level of wars between neighborhoods based on race and ethnicity, et cetera, and take war as a metaphor. So I think that I'm sure that the group that came up with this did that constant dance that we're about to get into of which is first, how do you lead, and do we need to get it perfect? For me, the important part is getting the work done.
I agree with you. And I think that, we've had some of those conversations in our office too. And it is important. There's a lot of learning and a lot of thinking that goes on about this in terms of those root causes and how to really get at, this whole conversation we're having. It's kind of like chicken and egg and what's the priority, but I like that idea of targeted universalism where, you're drawing at the most vulnerable, and then by default, what blesses one blesses all kind of thinking, but would certainly would love to entertain anyone else who has thoughts on this.
Giovanni, if you're trying to talk, you're muted. I'm sorry. Or we can't hear you, at least.
There can't hear. No, can't hear you.
Uh-oh.
Oh,
there, okay, you're starting to come in.
Oh, maybe it was the headphones.
Okay, there you go.
How about now?
Yes.
Yep, you're good.
Okay. I was saying in our roundtable discussions, the focus is climate control. So I definitely see, looking at that, after we put it into words, that the focus does, I'm not going to say it shifts, but I absolutely understand what you're saying. But in our actual discussions, climate control is definitely the heart of the war that we're fighting.
Okay, well, I think this has been really good food for thought. Lots of great input. Like I said, please continue to put your thoughts in the Google Doc. In terms of a group check-in or takeaways, would still love to hear what you have to share. You can, so we have some homework, additional feedback in the vision statement by the end of this weekend would be best. This Seattle Why Lead with Race is a good article that might help kind of put some more of these thoughts in order. And then for the next meeting, reread the equity tool draft content that was sent in an email I believe last week, and then it was attached to your meeting reminder today. And we will send another email out prior to the next meeting with more prompts to prepare for the work that we'll do on the equity tool. That one is going to be a lot more specifics about how to incorporate equity into our planning process. But we wanted to make sure that we really cemented this vision and made sure that everyone took some time to just sit with your thoughts, have conversation with each other, so that we can all take a step back and then get off and running in the same direction. So our next meeting is January 6th at 11. And for now, there's a survey that Wendy is going to put the link to in the chat. And that's another opportunity for you to enter some thoughts about these meetings, how you're feeling. Again, this is very interactive. We are evolving our processes. We really want to make sure that this is a good use of your time and ours. We really appreciate all of your participation. You are the movers and shakers in this buildings and energy world of Richmond, and want to make sure that you stay engaged and that you feel like this is a good use of your time and you understand what we're trying to do, and leading into the next meeting that you understand what the expectation is. So any other questions or points of clarification? Anything anyone want to share? Okay, well, I'll stay on if you have any questions for me. Otherwise, please, like I said, go to the survey in the chat. And with that, I will wish you a happy holidays and look forward to seeing you next month. Thank you so much.
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Don.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.